Welcome, everyone, to Women of the Military podcast. I'm really excited to have Marisol here today to talk about her experience in the military. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, let's start with why did you decide to join the military?
I joined fresh out of high school. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood. I did have college money, even though I got accepted to a university I wanted to go to. I just couldn't afford it. So, between not affording it, trying to get out of a bad neighborhood, and also wanting to serve my country, I decided to go to the Navy. But actually, I decided to go into the Navy when I was in sixth grade. There was a school fair, and they had all these recruiters show up, and firemen, and police officers, and military. And so I remember talking it out with the Navy representative. And so that laid out the foundation for me for in the future. And then by ninth grade, I decided I really, really wanted to go into the military. And my ultimate goal was to become a nurse corps officer. But I initially went in enlisted right after high school.
Okay, so you got into the college that you wanted to, but your family didn't have the money, and so you were like, I'll join the military. Did you know about the GI Bill or education benefits you can get from the military?
At that time, I didn't. I didn't know much about the military. So eventually, I did get a scholarship when I was enlisted. I got a scholarship. I got an Archie scholarship for nursing scholarship, actually.
Okay. Okay, so let's go back to you enlisting. What job did you pick when you enlisted into the Navy?
Aviation.
Okay.
I came in undesignated, and then I was what they call a striker, where you decide later on what you want to do. So I picked aviation storekeeper, which is logistics now.
Okay. And you went to boot camp, and then do you call it A school?
There's
Is that
a
what you're
school, but because I was undesignated, I didn't have a job basically. I went in just basic training and then went to my duty station.
Okay. So when you were at your duty station, you picked your job and then you learned on the job, or how did that all work?
Learned on the job. I was a striker. That's what they call it in the Navy, striker. Because I was
Okay.
undesignated, I didn't have a job. So I was just an airman recruit. I was an E1 with
Okay.
no real job title.
And did you go to a ship or did you go to a land-based oh, like,
It
can
was
you tell I
short
wasn't in the
command.
Navy?
Short command, yes, short command. Naval Air Station, Jacksonville.
Okay, and what was that experience like?
It wasn't bad. I was the youngest one there. I was fresh out of boot camp, so I was the youngest airman at the time, youngest staff member. So I had a lot of big brothers and sisters, essentially, people looking after me. Um, but with that being said, they thought I was, I guess, too naive, which I was at the time. But I was also very ambitious. I knew I wanted to be an officer and I wanted to be a nurse and just go to nursing school, but I didn't know how. So I would ask a lot of questions. And initially, nobody would take me seriously, especially when I had just reported that I came in like, hey, I want to be a nurse, I want to be an officer. And everybody's like, okay, sure, little, recruit, just, here's a broom, go sweep something. Nobody took it seriously. And I worked hard. I got good evaluations. I did well on my, physical readiness exams, and I started going to school at night. I was using tuition assistance to show everybody that I was serious. I was getting A's. And that helped me when I finally built up the courage to put in my officer package. I had to get letters of recommendations. I had to provide transcripts. I had to go in front of a chief's board. So the senior enlisted, it's kind of like a giant panel interview, basically. And they pelted me with questions. Why do you want to be an officer? Why do you want to be a nurse? What if you don't get selected? What's your next plan? And, how much money do you have in the bank? Because when you get an ROTC scholarship at that time, you stop working. You just lived off of a stipend and the scholarship. So I had to come up with a plan. And I answered all of their questions. And at the end of the board, they said, Airman, you did a great job. You were very mature with your answers. And so they all recommended me for the scholarship program. So I was endorsed by the command. And a year later, I got the letter saying I got accepted into the program. And off I went to Newport, Rhode Island. The program was called Boost at the time, Brought in Officer Selection and Training. So it was a 9-month program. And upon completion of the program, then you got awarded your ROTC scholarship, and then you had to apply to colleges again. And so I applied to, I think, only three. I got into all three, and I ended up going to Jacksonville University because I felt it was, they gave more one-on-one attention. It was a smaller school, and that's what I wanted. I was always very shy. So University of Florida was appealing. I got accepted, and I was excited about that, but I found it intimidating at the time. I was like, no, I think for me, for my personality, I want a smaller university. So that's why I ended up in Jacksonville University, and I did my 4 years, got commissioned, and then I ended up getting stationed in Florida for my first, actually, that would have been my first duty station as an officer.
Okay. So how long were you enlisted before you started the switch from enlisted to officer?
3.5 years.
Okay. And then you said you went to like a 9-month training and then you went to school. So it's kind of it was a multi-layer process. You had to apply, get accepted, then you had to go through, that training, and then you had to apply to school. So it wasn't just like a one and done. It was a lot of work.
Yes, it was a lot of work from the time I reported to my duty station because I had to learn the military. I had to learn the procedures, how to apply for anything. You had to request permission for everything. I had to request permission to take classes at night. I had to request permission to apply for this program. So just learning the military lifestyle while trying to switch careers already in a short amount of time. It was a lot. It took a lot. It took a lot of humility and just grit and determination.
Yeah, but you had a goal and you knew what you wanted, and so you found a way to make it happen. I think that's another great story on the podcast talking about like having a goal and using that like as a focus point to get where you want to go. And so I think it's so important if you want to do something to let people know that you want to do it and then, work to get there.
Exactly. I was very open from the beginning, even though people didn't take me seriously at first. But once I got that acceptance letter, everybody was congratulating me. And I'm thinking, you guys were like not even on my team in the beginning. Now everybody's like, oh, hey. The Chiefs were calling me ma'am already. It was really funny. So
That
it
is
worked
funny,
out.
but that's really cool. I love that they were like, "What does this girl wanna do?" Like, and they're like, "Oh, she got it, she can do it." That's really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just how I've always been. Always been determined to whatever gets into my brain and I'm like, I'm gonna make this happen. I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. I work really hard and jump through hurdles.
So you talked about how when you got off active duty to do ROTC, you had, like, that 4 years window
4 years.
of being on scholarship, but, not getting a paycheck. So, were there any challenges while you were going to school in that limbo period?
Besides schooling, I worked really hard to get a room and board scholarship as well from the university. So I didn't have to worry about paying the room and board because the scholarship only covered tuition, books, and uniforms. So we had to wear our khakis for drill like once a week. And then our PE, our PT workout uniform that we had to wear. Um, so I actually made out. And then I applied for other grants as well, state grants. So I had a little bit of money coming in. So that helped me as well. And then in the summertime, I would work. And then weekends, I would babysit to have that extra cash coming in. But for the most part, even though I was poor and broke, I felt wealthy and blessed because I had a roof over my head. I had a free ride to school. Well, sort of. I had to work for it. But I just felt blessed. But yeah, I was broke the whole time I was in college.
Yeah, but you made it through, and feel like everyone's pretty, we're all like just trying to
Yeah,
get by with a limited amount of money. And if you have your room and board paid for and then your schooling paid for, then I mean you're well on your way. But yeah, I mean you can see from your story how hard of a worker you are because of all the things that you had to do just to get through that. So you said you were in Florida for excuse me. You were in Florida for school and then your first officer assignment was also in Florida. So what was that like to go from, like, going to school and then being an officer? Were you in the same city or
same city. Yes.
yeah.
Same base, Naval Air Station, Jacksonville. Same base I was at when I was enlisted. So I ran into some of the former coworkers, chiefs that were there, or there were maybe first classes, E1s, and they were now, E6s, E7s, and just seeing them was different. And I went from saluting people to now being the one saluted. So that was trippy. I wasn't used to that. It took some getting used to for me in the beginning, because I still had, I guess, the enlisted mentality. Like, I'm still enlisted, but really I was an officer. So I was still the same person inside, but on the outside, people saw someone different. They would look at the collar devices and they would, snap to attention. And I was getting ma'am sandwiched all day long from that point forward, from the time I got commissioned to the time I retired.
I'm still the same person. But that's the culture and tradition of the military. And then you got to do nursing, which was what you had always wanted to do. So did you have a specialty in nursing, or did you move around? Like, what was that side like?
Yeah, so I start off in the medical surgical ward, but I always wanted to be an ER nurse. Like, I always had my eye on being an ER nurse. And so after a year of working hard, I would, when we had a little bit of like not free time, but slower, I guess, moments, not a lot of patients going on, I was able to go to the ER and help out for like an hour or two. So I would, float, because sometimes they did ask for help. They will call us on their ward, say, hey, do you have a nurse to spare? And I would always volunteer. I'm like, I want to go. And I was the only one who would really volunteer. The other nurses didn't care for the ER because they found it intimidating. They like the medical surgical. It's slower paced. And the ER, you could easily, like when I worked in the ER, I used to triage 80 patients in one 12-hour shift. So it was a lot. And eventually I got to know the department head of the ER, and he liked me. He liked how I was always asking questions and just willing to learn. So when my year came up, called me. We talked to my department head and stuff, and they said, hey, we want to request Ensign. At that time, I made it was Barrios, Ensign Barrios, to come work for us. And I was just so excited that I got requested by name to go work at the ER as a brand new ensign, because it's not common. Usually they want you to be a little bit more seasoned, like at least get 2 years, sometimes 3 under your belt before you go work in a critical care. But they were short staffed, and I had proven that I was willing to learn. So they took me in, and it was exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. So how long did you stay in Jacksonville after you moved to the ER?
I was there, I think, for another 4 years, and then I would then go to other duty stations. I was in Newport, Rhode Island. I was in 29 Palms. What other clinic did I do? I think those were the main ones that I did, because I was in nursing for 10 years. And then I decided to switch careers again within the medical community, which was unheard of. I wanted to originally be a foreign area officer. It's like a diplomat. You get to travel and be in different embassies, and that sounded exciting to me. And I applied 3 times, and I just would not get it. And I was getting frustrated because the nursing community was not supporting me. They did not want to release me. So it wasn't until the 3rd try that I called the community manager. And I said, hey, I really want to switch careers. I'm burnt out just from doing critical care for so long. It does burn you out. And I didn't have a social life. I was working 16-hour days, nights, weekends, holidays. I just worked a lot, and I wanted to do something that seemed a little bit more exciting, more flexible as well. And so when I talked to the community manager, they're like, well, I guess I can release you, but what if I decide not to release you? And I was like, well, then I'll just get out of the military, because I'm done. I was at my 10-year mark at that point. So I was like, I'll just go and, go work for some corporation. And I had just gotten my MBA as well. I just got my master's. So while I was a nurse, I was going to school at night, working towards my master's while working full time. So that was also a lot of work and insanity. So I had already made up my mind, if I didn't get selected a 3rd try, then after the 3rd try, then I would just get out. So I did not get selected for my first choice, but I did get selected for the intelligence community, which was my second choice. And I'm glad because I was so much happier after I got into the intelligence community and learned something new.
Yeah, so let's talk about that transition from nursing to Intel. Yeah, I mean, most of the nurses I talk, they stay in nursing. So it's interesting to hear that you were like, I was burnt out, I was ready for something new. And then you like were straight up with the detailer and was like, well, if you don't let me go, then I'm just gonna get out. So either way, you're gonna be down a nurse. So
Pretty much, yes, because they were saying, well, it's never been done before, and the line community doesn't take the medical community seriously, so you probably won't get selected, and you won't make rank, and blah blah blah. And I said, that's fine, I'll try anyway. I want them to tell me no. I want the community to say no to me, not the nurse corps. I want the
right.
intelligence community, the foreign area officer community to say no to me. And that's just always been my mentality. I never took advice from people who hadn't done what I wanted to achieve. Because it's always the naysayers that were doing something else or never tried to do what I was trying to do, telling me no, or you're crazy, or it's never going to happen. And so when people tell me no and I'm persistent, all I hear is not right now. All I'm hearing is, this is not your time.
I
Or
think
there's
that's
something
good.
else that's better that's waiting for you. So when it's true, not to sound corny, but when doors would close, others would open.
Right.
And
Well,
sometimes I would just bust it down.
and don't take advice from people who haven't done it. Like they were like, it's never been done before, and you're like, okay. I don't care. That doesn't intimidate me. Let's let them say no, not you. So that's really good advice too.
Yeah. And I was the first nurse corps officer to successfully transition into the intelligence community. And as far as I know, it hasn't been done since. I know word spread like wildfire. I had two nurses reach out to me via Outlook back in the day and say, hey, I'm stationed in Sicily and I heard that you did this transition. How did you do it? So I would, tell them and I'd share my package. It was because I also had to put a package kind of like I did for the ROTC scholarship. It's letters of recommendations, college transcripts, personal statement, interviews. It's also a lot of work. And so I would share that with them. I shared it with two other nurses, but they weren't able to, get picked up. And
Yeah.
also, I warned them. I told them that the nursing community was going to give them a hard time. They're going to give them a hard time releasing because they gave me a hard time. And sure enough, they had some resistance and they gave up after the first try. Whereas I was stubborn. I kept trying. The third try was going to be my last try. And then I was going to just get out. But luckily,
Right.
the third try worked for me.
Yeah. And so what year was it when you made that switch from nursing to Intel?
2009 was when
Okay.
I started submitting my applications. So I submitted 3 packages in a 12-month period. And then by the time I got selected, because I didn't get selected for my first choice, I had to take orders to my last nursing duty station. It was 29 Palms. And it wasn't until I arrived that they said, oh, you've been selected, but you just arrived. So now you have to finish a minimum of, I think it was 18 months. However, the nurse corps tried to hold on to me a lot longer. So they weren't trying to meet their part of the deal. But eventually the Intel community said, okay, nurse corps, enough. We want to take her. But that by the nurse corps holding on to me longer than they were supposed to, it actually helped me out professionally because I made rank after they told me I would not get selected. I was a lieutenant at the time and I got selected to lieutenant commander 04. So it was great. So I got selected and I got promoted. And it was just exciting for me. I was just like, oh my God, things are finally happening. And then I went to Intel school. By the time I went to Intel school, that was 2012.
Okay.
So the whole process from 2009, when I had the idea, okay, I'm going to start applying to the actual process and then getting selected or rejected a few times, then selected, and then going to my next duty station, fulfilling the obligation, minimum obligation, and then going to Intel school, it was 2012.
Wow. So quite a process.
Yeah.
So you went to Intel school, and then what was your first assignment after that?
My first duty station was the Office of Naval Intelligence in Suitland, Maryland, and I was there for about 3 years, I believe. And
Yeah.
I had to learn so much. It was just a steep learning curve for me. In the military, we already have a bunch of acronyms. It goes by communities, by branches, and then I mean within our Navy, we have so many different acronyms. So I was used to the medical acronyms, and now I had to learn new acronyms and new processes. The difference was that I was more senior. So here I am asking all the dumb O1, E1 questions. And people are looking at me like, why don't you know that you're in O4? Why don't you know that? And I had to explain to them, I just transitioned from the medical community. And people were like, wait, what? Why would you do that? And so the first year that I was at ONI, like almost every day or at least weekly, people would ask me about my background. Like, hey, I heard you were a nurse, and is your license still active? I'm like, yes, yes, it is. So I had like people doing like hallway consultation. Like, can you look at this rash? What do you think? Or had this one guy ask me to read his PPD for him because technically I could say I was licensed. So I'm like, I'm licensed in Florida. Ah, it doesn't matter. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm really not a nurse anymore, but yes, my license is technically still good. So here I was an RN with a top secret clearance. So it just blew people's mind. Like, wait, what? Everybody was just intrigued by my background.
Yeah, but it sounds like it was a good switch for you. You said that you were glad that you made the switch, you were burnt out. Did it give you more of that flexibility of like stability in the job? Because I know nurses, you work lots of weird hours and lots of hours. So,
Eventually, so my first year, I had to be on the watch floor. So I was doing 12-hour shifts yet again, like nurse corps, but it was different. It was in front of a desk, um, nerding out, doing intel stuff, doing top secret stuff. Whereas as a nurse, I did it on my feet for up to 14 hours sometimes, even 16 hours if I was deployed. So it was long days and it was physically exhausting as well. And, you're dealing with people's lives. So doing a 12-hour shift and a desk job was like a piece of cake for me. It was so easy. Meanwhile, other watchers would complain, oh my God, I can't wait to get off shift. And I'm thinking, this is easy. You guys are complaining. Um, but I only had to do that for not even 6 months because then I got promoted to a new job. So I was the branch head for production. So I was in charge of overseeing all of the Intel products, the briefs, the assessments, all that stuff. I was overseeing all that. Um, just because my CO really liked me and she liked my leadership style, and she's like, "Oh, you bring something else to the table with your nursing background." I'm like, "Okay," because in the nursing community, from the time you're in O1, you already have people working for you. Like I had medics, I had corpsmen, I had other LVNs working for me, CNA. So I was used to being in charge of people, and it was like easy for me. And I guess the Intel community, it's not that way in the beginning until you're more senior. So yes, I was new to the community, but I was not new to leadership and management. So that
so
helped
you
me
were
a
able
lot.
to, so you were able to transfer those leadership skills, something that you wouldn't have got in the Intel community that you got from nursing, and then you just had to learn like all the acronyms and all the like the basics of Intel. I mean, acronyms in the military, yes. They
Yeah.
vary by branch, by career by everything. Yeah.
And then getting comfortable briefing executive leadership. I had to brief the admiral every morning, and that's something that I just wasn't used to. I mean, the highest ranking person that I would deal with usually in '05, maybe in '06. And here I'm in the Intel community, I'm dealing with 3 stars, 4 stars. And so I had to learn to quickly get comfortable speaking in front of people with confidence because I was the one giving the threat assessment. So I had to come correct and make sure that my research was correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big shift too. But it sounds like you were able to take your experience from nursing and the aspects of that translated over well, and then use that, and then learn new skills like briefing and all the other intel stuff that was required. But it sounds like it was a good switch. And how long did you do intel before you retired?
8.5 years, I think. So I hit the 20-year mark, and then it was time to go, and it felt great to retire.
Yeah, I'm sure. So what was the transition out of the military like?
For me, it was fairly easy, but that's because I worked really hard at it. 6 months before I got out, I worked on my resume. I filed for my VA claim. I started going to medical first, making sure that my medical record, my active duty medical record, was on point. So any ailments that I needed to readdress, make sure it was documented again to make sure that it's an ongoing issue. So like neck pain, back pain, knee pain, all my joints, basically. I'm like an old lady. I made sure all of those issues were addressed again. And then I made sure that my service record was also squared away. So I made sure that I had no medals missing. And sure enough, I had a couple of medals. I had a couple of service schools that were missing that I had submitted like 2-3 times because for whatever reason they kept not receiving them or they kept misplacing. I don't know what they were doing, but I had to send them stuff. So I made sure that was put in there correctly. I started thinking about what kind of jobs I wanted to do post-military career. I was just playing around with the market, see what was out there, and I attended a job fair. I remember I was nervous the day I was going to the job fair. I'm like, why am I nervous? Like, I'm talking to civilians. And I got all dressed up in my business casual attire to start networking. And I remember they had different booths for medical and then all these other corporations there. And I was so nervous that I started with the medical group. So I talked to like whatever hospital was at the time there. I'm trying to remember the name of the hospital, but I don't remember at this point. But I know there was a VA hospital as well that was representing. So I went and talked to them. And then once I got the jitters to calm down, I started talking to all the other recruiters in the different booths, and I had my resume I was handing out to people. Back then, I had no idea how atrocious my resume was. It was just terrible because I stayed up the night before just researching how to write a resume, how to do an elevator pitch, and I kept seeing all this information, put all everything you've done into one page. Well, how do you fit 20 years into one page? You can, but it's not pretty. So I had to learn to write my own resume properly and made it 2 pages and only put on there what was relevant as it related to the new jobs I was trying to seek out. Because my very first resume, I had my intel and my nursing on there, which it's 2 separate things. It confuses recruiters, especially if they don't know what we do in the military. They don't understand that we do take on so many different hats in the military. For example, even though I was an intel analyst, at the end of my tour, I was a speechwriter for a 4-star admiral. That was not my primary duty, but it became my primary duty towards the end. So you develop all these skills. So we all make the mistake of trying to bunch in all of our skills in there. And that's what I did. And it was a terrible resume, but my elevator pitch was good. And so I was able to get attention and keep in touch with some recruiters. But eventually I ended up taking a year off to just decompress. And I worked on my project management professional certification. And then COVID hit. So it would be a year before I applied to any jobs. And then once I got my PMP certification, I started applying, and a week later I had like 3 job offers.
Wow.
So
I
worked
really
at it.
I like that you talked about how I feel like the military needs to figure out how to teach us how to write resumes like as we're in the military so that we can build on it, because you get to like 6, 10, 20 years and you've never written a resume before, and then you're like supposed to write a resume and know how to do it. And the logic thing is like to put everything, but yeah, if you have such a varied career, you're gonna confuse the recruiter with like all the different things. Even like my background when I was in the military was civil engineering, and now I'm a podcaster and writer, and that's very different. And I can take some of the stuff that I learned from that and add it to my resume, but I can't use that, because then they're like, why is an engineer applying for this job? It doesn't make any sense. And then they just move on. So I think that's really good advice to talk about, like the things that you learn and pull that into your resume, but focus on what the job is. And you have to tailor your resume based on what job you're applying for. You can have like a template you start with, but then you have to customize it when you're giving it to a recruiter or to a specific job so that you can get that.
It
And
has to
then,
be relevant.
yeah,
Everything has to be relevant. For example, if I were to apply to other Intel jobs now, I will not include like the last 10 years that I was in the medical field. It's just not relevant. So you want to keep it no more than 10 years, basically.
yeah, yeah. That makes, yeah. And then you got your PMP while you were taking a year off, and then and then COVID hit, and you're probably like, what am I gonna do? But it sounds like you were able to get a job after you got that certification. So was the first job in person or virtual, or how did that work?
It was in person, and it was hybrid.
Okay.
So because it was a team of Intel analysts, and so they broke up the team in half. So we would show up every other week, and we did that for about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And we had a zipper computer, which is secret. You can do secret stuff on it, and a token. So we were allowed to take that home, but it had to be like certain parameters you had to meet to have this computer in your home, and you had to lock it up every night after you were done with it. So they were very specific. But yeah, it was a hybrid model, which I actually liked. It was nice.
Yeah.
It was new for me because I
So
wasn't used to that.
yeah, I mean that's really different, but we had to adapt to the circumstances. And yeah, I've heard of offices like splitting so that only half the office was in place to limit the number of people. And I mean lots of creative ways to keep the mission going, but also to keep people safe. So are you still with that company today, or are you doing something new?
Yes to both. So after 6 months, I had to quit that job because my husband's also in the military, and he got orders to come work for some admiral in a different state. So we had to move. So I had to quit my job. I was so bummed out because I enjoyed it. I was working at Special Operations Command Pacific in Hawaii. So I was working with retired and active duty Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and I love the work, and the guys were great. So I really enjoyed learning about what they did. So I had to leave that behind, but I enjoyed it a lot. And then like 2 months later, not even 2 months later, once I moved to my husband's new duty station location, I got a call from my previous employer, and they're like, "Hey, Marisol, we're looking to hire a new recruiter, Intel recruiter, and we're wondering if you were interested. And because of COVID, we're thinking about making it a remote job for now, temporarily, just to see, because the job was actually in DC, and my husband was stationed in San Diego. So here I am on the West Coast, and they're asking me to work East Coast hours, basically. And I thought about it, and I was like, recruiting. I don't know. I don't like the idea of having to cold call people and just, I don't know, it's not me. But it was something different, and I was curious. I wanted to learn more about the hiring process so that I could share that with other veterans and transitioning service members. So that's exactly what I did. I took the job, and I I'm still doing that now part time. But I also started my own actual resume writing business for that reason, because I was getting so many crappy resumes from veterans and transitioning service members that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who writes, crappy resumes when they get out of the military. So it's a common theme. They're all just so poorly written because we just don't know what we don't know. And I think, being a speechwriter helped me learn how to articulate certain things, story tell, and then use unclassified language and civilian language. So I'm able to translate military jargon into civilian speak. And also just being a recruiter, I know how to tailor the resume to job descriptions. I know what recruiters are looking for in resumes, and hiring managers. I understand how the applicant tracking system really works. And I promise you, it's the recruiters reading the resumes and rejecting your application. So for the ATS I use, it shows the resume first. So I'll scan through it real quick and look for keywords. Okay, Intel. It depends on what the requirements are. So if it says must have top secret clearance, must have a bachelor's degree, must have experience using these XYZ databases, that's what I'm focusing on when I'm reading people's resumes. And if I see what I like, then I move on to their application. And that's where it'll ask them more specific questions like, do you have an active top secret clearance? So sometimes the application will ask for specific questions because they may not be reflected on your resume. And so some ATSs are set up by the recruiter or the hiring manager to do what's called knockout questions. So sometimes it'll say, do you have an active top secret clearance? And if you say no, then that's an automatic rejection because that's one of the minimum requirements. So there's no sense in moving forward if you just don't meet the basic qualifications. So that's something where the ATS is programmed to do an automatic rejection, but the recruiter has to set that up. But for mine, I have those settings off. So I manually reject everybody's applications.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a part-time job working for the company as a recruiter, and then you have another part-time job / full-time job running a business helping people. So that's really cool. I love that you took a skill that you weren't very qualified in and you've learned a lot about, and now you can help veterans, especially because you've seen how many veterans are struggling with that skill.
Yeah, especially the intel community and also special operations forces like SEALs, Rangers. They don't understand how to civilianize the language. I mean, you can't just say I killed people. You can't put that on your resume. You have to massage the language for the
Right.
civilians, or else you're going to scare them away because you did much more than just, shoot at people. You're a leader.
Well,
You
you
did
can't be
change
like,
management.
I did work, it was classified. Like, you have to tell people, like, what you did, but not the classified part, right? Because it's
Yeah.
really hard when you have, like, if you're doing top secret things and you can't talk about what you're doing, how do you express that in a resume so that someone can understand? Because if you just say it's classified, they're gonna be like, "What? What does that even mean?"
Yeah, so I teach people how to write their own resume. I mean, I write it for them. It depends if they just want me to review it or if they want me to actually do the rewrite. And then I explain to them why I'm making the changes that I'm making so they understand because I usually let them write their rough draft first. I'm like, give me what you have because I want them to get in the habit of writing their own resume. So it's a group effort. So yes, I'm going to write it for you, but I need you to also understand the process because you're going to change jobs eventually. So you need to learn how to edit your own resume unless you want to pay someone every time you want to make an update. So I teach people basically how to fish,
I love
and write
that.
their resumes. And I teach them how to civilianize the language and, how to tap dance around classified stuff that we don't even talk about. I'm just like, okay, so did you lead people? Did you run programs, operations? Did you rewrite SOPs? Did you influence command changes? Stuff like that. So that's kind of like the language and information I pull out of them. And then I just put it on paper and make sure it matches the job descriptions that they're applying for. But I also give very honest feedback. So I always ask them to give me 2 to 3 job descriptions of the roles they are seeking. And if I don't see that they meet the requirements, I ask them like, okay, it says here you got to do, I don't know, project management, for example. And they're like, oh, I've never done project management. Well, then you're not qualified for this job. So you need to be able to meet the requirements. I'm not going to just make up bullets for you. You either meet the requirements or you don't. So I make
Yeah.
sure that they do meet the requirements. And then I also teach them how to apply to jobs with that resume because people make the mistake of paying like thousands of dollars for a nicely written resume, but then they're applying to roles that are either beneath them or that they're, underqualified for. So for example, maybe you only have 5 years of project management experience and it says it on your resume, 5 years project management experience. But then you go and apply for a senior position that's looking for 10 plus years. You're going to get rejected. They have minimum requirements for a reason. or someone who's senior, they have 20 years and they're applying to a junior level project management role that maybe only pays, let's say 80,000, but because they're so senior, they're looking for 150,000. They're not going to get selected for that reason because now they're too senior and they know you're too expensive because different roles have different budgets, at least with government contracting. So different levels have different budgets. So yes, you may have 20 years, but you just applied to a junior level position that has a junior budget. And a lot of people don't understand that. So they're applying, they're like, I'm qualified. I don't understand. You're looking for 5 years. I got 20. It's like, yes, that's a junior role. If you see anything that has 5 years or less or 5 years experience, it's a junior role usually. So those are things that transitioning service members need to be mindful of when they apply for roles. And when they get frustrated, they're not getting selected. You're either applying to jobs that are too junior or too senior. So you need to really stay in your swim lane and be truthful with yourself and find out, okay, how many years of experience do I actually have?
Yeah. Such great advice. If someone is listening and they want to learn more about about you, I can talk. About having you help them with their resume and finding a job, where would be the best place for them to go?
LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's the only social media platform that I use at this time. Eventually, I'll probably branch out to the other ones. But for now, it's LinkedIn. There's a link on my profile that takes you to my Calendly. So it shows the availability. It shows all the services I offer with the prices and availability. So I also do LinkedIn optimization. So I know a lot of transition service members and veterans struggle with their LinkedIn profiles, and they're usually bare. And a lot of recruiters go on LinkedIn to hunt for candidates. So you have to have a really good profile, or at least have it filled out, and use actual titles that you want to be found under. Like, nobody's looking for a servant leader or dynamic leader or global leader or a master sergeant or a platoon commander. They're not looking for those titles. They're looking for project manager, IT specialist, IT manager, cybersecurity analyst, cybersecurity specialist, nurse, doctor. So these are terms that you need to get used to using. So whatever you do in the military is transferable into the civilian sector. You just need to open up your mind and do your research.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that people can find it easily. And thank you so much for being a guest, for sharing your story, for sharing all your wisdom. I feel like if people are transitioning, they really need to listen in and then get connected with you because you have so much great information that will really help people in their job search. So I like to end my interviews with, what advice would you give to a young woman who's considering joining the military?
I say do it, but do it if you have endurance, grit, determination to succeed, because the military can be hard, especially as a woman. You will always be, or often be, the only female in the room. I know for me, I was usually the only minority female in the room. Basically, my whole career, it didn't matter when I was enlisted all the way till I was an officer. And it was actually even that word, I don't want to say the word worse, but when I was an intel officer, I was the only Hispanic female intel officer. So there weren't too many of us. So be prepared to be the minority in the group as a woman every time. And you do have to use your big girl voice at times because you're working with a lot of testosterone. And I was very shy, but I had to eventually find my voice. And so you'll find it too if you don't have it. But the military is a good way to gain leadership experience. You may not get paid much at first, but if you stay in long enough, eventually you'll make some money and you'll build up your skills.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for the work that you're doing to help veterans in building their resume and, learning all the recruiting skills that you've learned.
Thank you for having me. It's fun.